Good morning, fellow streakers. How are you? Jami, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome to our Streaking Podcast.
The Streaking Podcast, hosted by yours truly, Jeff Downs, and
Jami Downs.
And we are streakers, and we're proud of it. We're proud to be streakers. And no, we're not those kind of streakers. In fact, I don't think that there is anything that would ever get you, Jami, to run across a football field.
There is nothing in this world that could get me to do that. I will never, ever be.
And Jami's personal mission, and mine as well, is to change the number one definition of streaking from what it currently is, running across a football field naked,
and I don't know,
to something that's quite significantly different, which is the simple practice of conscious, consistent actions that create life-changing results. And
I love that. So I was going to say, everybody that's introduced to streaking starts off that way.
Every time.
Streaking. Well, not that kind of streaking.
Yes.
But then it's fascinating to me that once that's out of the way, you kind of never look back.
Right, ever. You never look back.
It totally becomes a different thing in your life. The people that I've read that have written to us, either emails or written about it in blogs and their personal experience, they all start that way, not that kind of streaking.
Yeah.
But then once they get talking about it, the whole thought process of streaking is about the success that they've had in being able to create results.
I agree.
In their life.
So I gave the first definition, which is the subtitle of the book. And if you haven't had a chance to go out, and if you're new to the podcast and just listening to it for the first time, we've written a book on streaking. It is a 3.5 hour, we read it actually an audiobook, 3.5 hours read. If you've been coming back to the podcast, you already know this. And would love for you, if you've been reading the book, we are looking for reviews. If you wouldn't mind going on Amazon and sharing your review of the book, what it is that you thought, and even if you don't want to write anything, even if you just give it a star rating, what that does is help for others to be able to pick up the book. If
right.
the more reviews there are, the more the algorithms pick up what it is, or pick up the book and advertise it when people are looking for something like self-improvement.
Right. And if you're a streaker already and enjoy streaking, if you haven't already, download the app that helps you keep track of your streaks and introduces you to the community, as well as you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. We're in all those places, and you can learn more about the things that we're learning as we continue doing this and the people that are joining the movement.
Yeah, because we've all been just absolutely impacted by what streaking has done in our lives. And there's a lot of people that have been writing about their experience. And so feel free to join that. And what you said, Jami, to rate the app. Go on and rate the app and let us know, wherever it is, whatever you think it is. The feedback is invaluable.
Yes, the feedback is invaluable. The good and the not so good.
And the not so good. It all helps so that we can get better, because our whole idea here is to progress and get better as individuals, as an organization, as people overall.
So you bring up a good point, because we've talked a lot about the app has been an interesting thing, because no matter what, it's not quite where I want it to be.
And developers love hearing, Dave and the developers love hearing this.
And so it's an interesting thing, because it's come a long way,
yes.
But the further it comes, the more I want it to do.
Yes.
And so I get going and I'm like, oh, I want it to do this. Oh, I want it to do that. And so we talk about how interesting it is how you have to put it out there before it's where you want it to be.
Yes.
Because you can't actually get it to where you want it to be. And in some regards, we don't even know where we want it to be until we put it out there and people are like, oh, it should do this. And I think, oh, that's a great idea. It should. So that's a little bit what we were going to talk about today.
Well, that's what I was going to say is just before we got on the podcast, yesterday I was talking with someone and I forgot exactly the context of the conversation. However, what they said has stuck with me, and it was start before you're ready. Start doing whatever it is that you need to do as far as progress or personal performance or improvement or anything. Start before you're ready.
And how would that relate to performance?
I believe that there are sometimes I'm inhibited because I want to perfect something before I perform. And if I stop, I'll never get there. I'll never, ever get there because for whatever reason inside of me, and I looked up a little bit on this because of what we're going to talk about today as far as ego is concerned, my ego gets in the way.
Your ego gets in the way.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to believe, but it does.
And how so? What do you mean?
Well, so in relation to one of the things, so you've been reading Make It Stick.
Mm-hmm.
So Craig Christensen was on our podcast a few months ago, and he talked about, you asked him a question about what he was reading or education or something.
And this was one of the books that he talked about,
That he
Make
recommended.
It Stick. And it talks about how to learn in such a way that what we learn sticks with us, not just that we can test well or be able to regurgitate it short term, but to actually have the knowledge stick with us. It's been great.
So let's leave that question hanging out there just a little bit, the how I see ego getting in the way.
Okay.
Because it relates to what you're going to be talking about as far as Make It Stick, because you came across a chapter and it's kind of, it's rocked your world. I mean, you read it and you said
it's rocked my world in perfect relation to this podcast, because when I read this is, I thought about the podcast. So this is what I read. It's called Unskilled and Unaware of It.
Now just think of that one for a second.
Unskilled and unaware of it. Incompetent people. This is from the book Make It Stick. Quote.
And who's the author of this book?
It's a group of people.
Oh, is it a group of people?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll tell you in a minute.
Tell me. And I can put it in the show notes too.
Great. Make It Stick is the title of the book. I can tell you that.
All right.
Okay. Quote from the book. Incompetent people lack the skills to improve because they are unable to distinguish between incompetence and competence. I read that and I was like, I hate that sentence. Incompetent people lack the skills to improve because they are unable to distinguish between incompetence and competence. I have talked to everybody I know about this all week long, because I look at it and I'm like, great. How many things am I walking around on completely incompetent in and not even aware that I'm incompetent, because I'm so incompetent, I don't even have the awareness to know that I'm incompetent. I was like,
hey, go out there and get this book. It'll just make your day. You'll just feel amazing afterwards.
So it's interesting. Now, he talks about it in relation to education. And so the people that discovered this, and this phenomenon of particular interest for metacognition, which is our awareness of our own self-thinking, the way that we think, that's what metacognition is. And I'm letting you know that because I had to look that word up. But it's understanding and being aware of how you think. Says this phenomenon of particular interest for metacognition has been named Dunning-Kruger Effect after the psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, who discovered it. Their research showed that incompetent people overestimate their own competence and, failing to sense a mismatch between their performance and what is desirable, see no need to try to improve. Dunning and Kruger have also shown that incompetent people can be taught to raise their competence by learning the skills to judge their own performance more accurately, in short, to make their metacognition more accurate. So that was a little bit more. I was like, okay, but it's an interesting concept to think that there are things out there that we could be incompetent in, but not be aware. Our incompetence is so significant, we're not even aware of it. And so I did think about different things in my life, and then I thought, okay, how does streaking work with this? And I thought immediately, we have had several people write to us and share with us their streaks, and almost always one of their B statements is to be a lifelong learner, to want to do something that continues to improve and continue their learning. And I thought, this is to combat this phenomenon that of incompetency at such a level that you're not even aware you're incompetent because you haven't even been exposed enough to understand. And so this desire to be a lifelong learner is the antidote to this phenomenon of saying, okay, there's a lot of things out there for all of us that we're going to be incompetent in, because there are so many things to look at, to try to learn. There's so many things that we could learn. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of them we're completely incompetent in until we get exposure and are able to understand and learn. And then we can be more able to judge our performance in that thing.
Right.
Am I making any sense at all?
You are making complete sense. My mind has been firing on all different types of cylinders as I've listened. One of the ones being back to what you had asked me, how does ego get in the way?
Because one of the things that it says is that we cannot be often accurate judges of our own. So the way I'm just going to go off one more. They did a study, and it said they gave students a test of logic and asked them to rate their own performance.
Yeah.
In the first experiment, the results confirmed expectations that the least competent students were the most out of touch with their performance. Students who scored at the 12th percentile on average believed that their general logical reasoning ability fell at the 68th percentile. So their actual performance was in the 12th percentile, but their view of themselves, they believed they were in the 68th percentile.
Right.
The second experiment that they ran, they showed these incompetent students the answers of other students. So it says in a second experiment, after taking an initial test and rating their own performance, the students were shown the other students' answers and then their own answers and asked to re-estimate the number of test questions they had answered correctly. So now they got to see their peers and what their peers had answered.
Yeah.
And then rate your performance after you saw how other people answered. The students whose performance was in the bottom quartile failed to judge their own performance more accurately after seeing the more competent choices of their peers, and in fact, tended to raise their already inflated estimates of their own ability. So seeing how other people had answered just made them feel more confident in their own answers. It wasn't until...
In their own incompetence.
In their own incompetence. It wasn't until the third experiment where they gave half of this, so they gave the same group of students the test, and afterwards, half of them were given the opportunity to, half the students received 10 minutes of training in logic, which is what the test was on. It was a logic test.
Yeah.
So they received 10 minutes of training in logic. The other half of the students were given an unrelated task. All of the students were then asked to estimate again how well they had performed on the test. Now the students in the bottom quartile who had received the training were much more accurate estimators of the number of questions they got right and how they performed compared to the other students. Those in the bottom quartile who didn't...
So sorry, just to interrupt there. Because they got the training?
The group of students that got the training were much more accurate in judging their own performance at that point.
Okay.
So that now that they had been exposed to a little bit of what they were taking a test to, their judgment of that, they're like, oh, I didn't do as well as I thought.
So now I understand that I'm incompetent.
I understand that I don't know as much as I thought I knew.
Because that's what's going through my head. So what's the answer? I mean, because where I get frustrated is something that's said like this: you don't know your own incompetence. You're incompetent that you're incompetent.
Right. You're
so
like, how do I fix that?
So how do I fix that?
Do I walk around not knowing what I don't know?
So what is the fix?
So the fix was that they said even just 10 minutes of training. So I look at it and I'm like, that is what our streaks are doing for us, is that we are constantly... So that's why I said a lot of the people that have written in have desired to be a lifelong learner. So in other words, they are setting streaks that continue to expose them to things. I want to keep reading books. I want to meet new people. I want to read an article in my profession. I want to continue to take this 10 minutes of training that they gave these students for this logic test. I want to continue to be trained so that I can see things more clearly and judge my own performance more accurately.
So what that then indicates to me is that there is a necessary degree of humility in order to be able to overcome incompetence. Because if I don't have that humility, if I'm not teachable, if I'm not allowing feedback to be given to me, then I am not going to progress. And I may be very secure in my incompetence. One of the things I talk about is the idea of let's claw our way to mediocrity. You know, we fight to be mediocre because at mediocrity, I'm sufficiently competent at that point, but I know my own competence, and so my mediocrity is a place of comfort. Whereas what I believe that you're saying and what I hear from the book Make It Stick is that it's okay to question your own competence, and in questioning your own competence, to get outside feedback, to get outside training on that competence. Because ego, and this I just looked this up real quick. This is a little blog by, his name is Mike J, and it said he says, don't let your ego get in the way. And an interesting little take on it. He says, we all have ego, and contrary to popular perception, your ego is beneficial to your success. both personally and professionally. Your ego is part of your neurophysiological system. It helps protect your self-image and self-worth, and it helps create your self-concept. Sometimes, though, your ego can get in the way, and when that happens, the concern you have for yourself overrides what actually may be happening in reality. Whenever you feel threatened, Bob is trying to take my job. Blame. Mary said the customer didn't buy because of me. Shame. The boss knows I fudged the report. Or embarrassment. The entire company heard that I lost the big sale. Your ego kicks in and keeps you from clearly understanding reality. In other words, your ego makes up its own reality in response to the ego arrows people shoot your way. This false ego reality closes you off to the true situation and causes you to go into a defensive mode, ultimately hindering your success, which I think applies specifically to what it is that you're saying about make it stick. Is if I'm threatened, my ego is threatened by my own incompetence. Mm-hmm. In other words, I build a shield, I build a wall around my incompetence. Then what is that shield and that wall? Well, it's not admitting that I'm incompetent in particular areas. And so I really am not conscious of it. Whereas what you're saying and what I see with streaking as well is it's to say, no, I am not the person I want to be yet. I'm aspiring to be that person, and I'm okay to have my incompetence exposed, to have my insecurities be placed out there. I mean, that takes courage. I think that takes bravery to be able to put down that ego simply for the reason, like what was his name, Jay? What he said as far as our ego does serve a purpose.
Right.
I mean, it is there for a reason, Mike J. However, there's a balance, like in all things.
Right. That's what I was thinking too, is that there's this balance. In the article, in the book, Make It Stick, it talks about metacognition. In other words, being able to think about how you think. So it's raising things from the subconscious level to the conscious level, mm-hmm. which is so much of what streaking is about. It's mm-hmm. raising something from the subconscious, I'm not really thinking about it, to bringing it to this conscious place where I am not only thinking about it, but actively doing a small, simple thing every day, laughably simple,
right,
to promote this level of consciousness.
Do you have a reading streak? I know you haven't. Do you have one yet? Or
I
did
do.
You decide? You did decide to do one?
I think after reading this, I decided that I needed to. I've thought about it a lot. And yes, I've decided I have a reading streak. It's not very long right now.
Well, isn't that amazing? You're worried about how long the streak is.
No, just
what I was looking at. I mean, not 17, very long.
17 days.
So you just started it.
I did just start it.
So why did you start it?
For, I think, reading this part in the book. That was part of being a lifelong learner, as I thought, okay, how do you fight? How do you combat not knowing what you don't know? I mean, and at first I found it really unsettling, this idea that you could be incompetent. And why? I think the things that you were talking about in ego, I thought, wow, embarrassing. How many things do we not even know we don't know?
Yeah.
And then as I thought about it, I
ourselves.
Thought, everybody has this. Nobody knows everything.
Right.
Everybody has places where when you get introduced to something, your level of competence is really low, and you probably don't even know that. And I think that's with anything. I was at a dance competition with my daughter the other day, and we were at this facility that had a lot of artwork around it. And as I was passing by, I heard one of the girls say, "Oh my goodness, look at that painting. I could totally do that." I think that was, and I've had that same experience before where I've looked at something kind of and thought, I think I could totally do that. And then you realize people who are masters in their field often make something look very simple. And you look at it and you're like, I could do that. That to me is that's the incompetence. You don't even know you're incompetent because you have no idea the level of practice and learning that has gone into producing that, because you're just looking at it and it looks so simple. You're like, I could totally do that.
Right.
And not until you actually get into something and recognize that you start to realize the amount of effort and practice and attention to detail and consistent practicing that has gone into that has made it possible for them to either perform or produce this thing and make it look like it was very simple.
Which is why I love that you started a reading streak, is because what you decided at that moment, and this is where streaking comes into it, is you looked at it and said, and you had mentioned to me that there was something just before that, because I don't know if you had read that actual chapter yet when you started your streak, but one of the things that you had said to me is you said, you know what, I'm just not progressing. I'm not getting through the books. I think I need to set a streak, which is what we did. Why we happened on this whole methodology is you start with a streak. You start with a streak and you make it so laughably simple that there's no reason not to do it. And then you determine, or not even determine, but you try, not even try. You change your focus from what it is that you're doing or accomplishing, from what it is that you're accomplishing to how many days in a row can I do this thing? And that is just starting. It's just getting started. And when you're just like, start before you're ready.
Start somewhere. Start before you're ready.
That's the thing that we've loved about the whole streaking methodology. I went over, I grabbed her hands because I'm so excited. I didn't want you to stop talking. I would just get so excited. Is the streaking methodology is that it allows you to just start. How many people have said, "Oh, I've started a streak," and they haven't even finished the book yet?
Yes, you want to start because it's so simple that you can start, and it gives you permission. Not only permission, it teaches us that the only way to become proficient, the only way to become confident, the only way to acquire quality, all of these things to increase our performance, to be able to reach these goals and things, is you have to start. None of it is going to happen by thinking about it a lot. It's just not. You have to start doing something. And streaking says start. Start right now.
Start
today.
Small.
Start before you're ready. Start before you're competent. Start before you know what you're doing.
And see how many days in a row you can do it. And what happens is I just look at it, it's magical. And the reason I say it is because of the changes that I've made in my own life and the things that I've been able to recognize where I am incompetent and feel incompetence, and hope that I can continue to recognize that. So just going all the way back to where we started, start before you're ready and start with a streak.
Start before you're ready and start with a streak, and start today. Laughably simple. That might be hard, honestly, to make it laughably simple, but start laughably simple.
As you do, you will find a confidence that comes in yourself, like we talked about on the last podcast, because you're being consistent. You're having success in consistency.
Your performance and your actions become consistent, which creates success.
It is. We could continue.
We could keep
and going. We will. But let us know how your streaks are going. Jeffrey, Jeffery at streakingmastery.com.
Jami at Jami at streakingmastery.com. Download the book, download the app, follow us on Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook. Give us a review.
Please give us a review. And the review helps other streakers out there, and share your streaks with others and celebrate with them. We enjoy celebrating with you. And until we talk again,
start today and keep streaking.